Wherever you are, whatever the hour, welcome to the Digital Gazette. I'm Mercer, bringing you stories that illuminate minds, inform decisions, and inspire change. Good evening, I'm Mercer, and this is the Digital Gazette. Tonight we examine the single most relevant crisis for every person on Earth, the climate emergency. This is not distant science, it is a present reality: record heat, stronger storms, rising seas, collapsing harvests, and a growing legal, moral, and financial reckoning for the companies and governments that helped create the problem. The global climate system has crossed uncomfortable thresholds. In 2024, the World Meteorological Organization confirmed that the year was the warmest on record, with global mean temperature about 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, a number that places the planet in territory scientists once considered a near-future risk. That hotter baseline makes extreme heat, extreme rainfall, and powerful storms more likely and more destructive. Last year the world recorded well over 150 unprecedented climate disasters, heatwaves, floods, storms and compound events that exceeded historical norms and displaced hundreds of thousands of people. The acute toll of 2024 was not an anomaly, it was an escalator. Science is now able to name names in a way it could not before. Attribution studies increasingly link specific deadly events, heatwaves, intensified rainfall, and storm intensification, directly to past emissions from large fossil fuel corporations. That shift is moving climate change from an abstract problem into the legal and moral arena of responsibility and liability. At the same time, the IPCC's sixth assessment synthesis reminds us that risks accelerate with each fraction of a degree. Some impacts can be avoided with rapid emissions cuts, and others can only be managed through large investments in adaptation. The window to limit catastrophic outcomes is closing. The Philippines is one of the world's most vulnerable countries to climate change, geographically exposed, economically exposed, and socially exposed. It is an archipelago of thousands of islands, with long coasts, densely populated river plains, and millions of people whose livelihoods depend on climate-sensitive fisheries and agriculture. The Philippines consistently ranks at or near the top of global disaster risk indexes. That vulnerability is translating into measurable economic pain. Current estimates put annual losses from typhoons at roughly 1.2% of GDP, with extreme events in bad years pushing losses much higher, as much as 4.6% of GDP in catastrophic cases. Those losses hit infrastructure, agriculture, and government budgets, and they reduce funds available for schools, health, and development. Climate science also suggests the Philippines is seeing not only more intense storms but an increased risk profile for the kinds of storms that cause mass displacement. Attribution work and regional analyses indicate that warming oceans increase rainfall intensity and cyclone energy. In short, stronger storms that cause worse flooding and coastal surge. One study and related analyses have argued that some storm risks have roughly doubled under recent warming. Sea level rise is a slow, relentless threat. Certain parts of the Philippines are experiencing above-average local sea level rise and may see hundreds of thousands to a million people exposed to increased coastal flooding in coming decades unless major adaptations occur. That exposure includes low-lying cities, ports, coastal communities, and productive agricultural lands. Finally, adaptation finance is far short of what is needed. Regional lenders and multilateral banks warn of a wide funding gap. The Asia-Pacific region needs many times more annual investment to protect coasts and rivers. Without scaled finance, the poorest communities will continue to be last in line for protections. We know the problems, so why are we still so exposed? First, policy and implementation gaps. Governments still make pledges on emissions and resilience without the delivery mechanisms and enforcement that lock in change. Commitments without clear financing, timelines, and accountability are window dressing. Second, finance is misaligned. Billions are pledged, but far less reaches on the ground adaptation. Public budgets in vulnerable countries are already strained by recurrent disaster costs. When adaptation finance is slow or conditional, countries remain stuck reacting rather than preventing. The shortfall in adaptation funding is not a technical problem, it is political and economic. Third, equity and justice are neglected. The nations and communities most harmed by climate change typically contributed the least to historical emissions. This justice gap shows up as underfunded adaptation, weak insurance options, and limited recourse when disasters hit. As attribution science matures, the moral and legal pressure to compensate harms will only grow, but the current international system is not set up to deliver rapid, fair redress. Fourth, local capacities are uneven. Early warning systems, resilient infrastructure, land use planning, and community preparedness can cut losses dramatically, but they require sustained investment and governance reforms. When local agencies lack resources or face bureaucratic obstacles, the technical solutions never reach the front lines. This is the action plan, practical, financeable, and rooted in justice. 1. Make international commitments binding and transparent. Global agreements must evolve beyond aspirations to measurable, enforceable pledges with clear reporting and third-party verification. Countries and financiers must be accountable for the emissions and the finance they pledge. Robust monitoring and rapid reporting reduce greenwashing and build trust. 2. Close the adaptation finance gap at scale. Donors, development banks, and private capital must prioritize adaptation as urgently as mitigation. That means concessional finance, blended instruments, and project pipelines that channel funds to coastal defenses, flood management, resilient agriculture, and urban drainage, especially where communities are most exposed. The economic logic is clear. Every dollar invested in preparedness often yields multiple dollars in avoided damage. 3. Expand nature-based solutions and resilient infrastructure. Mangroves, wetlands, and watershed restoration reduce storm surge and flooding while supporting fisheries and carbon storage. Combine these with engineered solutions, seawalls, retention basins, improved drainage, and you get layered resilience that protects both people and livelihoods. 4. Strengthen local early warning systems and land use governance. Invest in community sensors, local forecasting, evacuation routes, and durable shelters. Update zoning laws and enforce building standards so new developments are not sited in known floodplains. Community-led mapping and participatory planning produce better, fairer outcomes. 5. Use attribution science to drive accountability and compensation. As studies increasingly link specific events to corporate emissions, international mechanisms must be prepared to demand restitution, not as revenge, but as a practical source of funds for adaptation and recovery. Legal routes are slow, meanwhile, voluntary settlements and dedicated climate reparations funds could accelerate assistance to the most affected. 6. Prioritize the Philippines and similar high-risk nations for fast funding and technical support. Given the Philippines' high exposure and current annual losses, multilateral lenders and donors should fast-track investments in coastal defenses, climate-smart agriculture, and insurance schemes. Support must include capacity building so local agencies can maintain and operate the infrastructure. The climate crisis is the defining shared challenge of our time. It is global in origin and local in consequence. For the Philippines, and for many countries, the choice is urgent. We can continue to treat disasters as inevitable tragedies, or we can invest in prevention, accountability, and justice that keeps people safe and economies intact. Science gives us the map. Policy must provide the roads. Finance must build the bridges. And citizens must demand all three. The longer we wait, the heavier the price. I'm Mercer, and this is the Digital Gazette. Illuminate, inform, inspire.